And so joining us this week, coming all the way from down under Australia, we have the general manager over at Umbrella Entertainment, Ari Harrison. How you doing, man?
Pretty good, thank you. How are you, Stephen? Andrew, thanks very much for having me here, guys. Very
Oh yeah,
happy to
it's
have that.
yeah, we're glad to have you, man. We're trying to like hit every label we can as much as possible. We try to get somebody from every label. It's gonna probably never happen because there's too many of them now. But
Yeah,
I'm
it will not stop Steven from trying though.
I will keep trying.
He will keep trying. But it's cool to get somebody from Umbrella Entertainment because I feel like we've been covering Umbrella since we
Yeah, they're
started.
they're always they're always part of the repertoire of labels that we typically have. And not that we're not interested in every label, but typically Umbrella is one of the few that we definitely cover every time you guys have announcements. And what I love a lot about it, Umbrella is, well, first of all, usually they're pretty region free. Anybody can watch them. That's always a great thing for anybody. And I think also you guys are usually pretty economical. You're not too expensive. I think
Yeah.
that's another great thing. And then also the variety of titles that Umbrella is releasing is always great. I'm always surprised every time
Thank
you
you.
guys announce something else, and I'm like, wow, they got that now. Like so, but yeah, I'm getting too ahead of myself.
No, no,
Ari,
no. I appreciate the praise. I'm always
no,
happy to
no,
hear it. Thank you very much. That's
no problem, man. But in general, I always like to just ask you, how you doing? How's a day to day life?
good. Good in general. I'd say Umbrella's doing really well. We're pretty happy with how things are going. We've always been a sort of diverse company in what we do. We started from sort of humble beginnings, and we can talk about that a bit later in terms of the just started with the DVD side and then eventually got into the cinema business. And then now we're sort of split between classics and new titles, and sort of exploiting all rights, not just physical, but the physical team are having a lot of fun lately. And I think that comes down to, the audience reaction that we're getting. And obviously sales have been strong with certain titles and, trying to explore different ways to get different titles out there and different partnerships. So, everybody's feeling pretty good. It seems like in general, sometimes the market isn't always in the best spot. And, after COVID, things were sort of getting shaken up a little bit. And I attend the markets overseas, like Cannes Film Festival and Berlin and Toronto, and I get that feedback from different distributors all around the world. And, even some of the Australian distributors have slowed down in terms of what they're acquiring and what they're distributing, not just across physical releases, but across all rights. And so we're sort of happy to be in a position that we can, still be strong and still try out new things. So yeah, I'd say pretty good.
That's good, man. That's good to hear. It was one of the weird, fortunate things that came out of the pandemic was it seemed like physical media took a boom. I think
Hmm.
people wanted to make sure that they, were holding the things in their hands that they liked, and instead of just trying to depend on the internet and these streaming services to be their only way of consuming their entertainment. So and we've seen it slowly happen with like music, with records coming back and people kind of starting to buy vinyl again. And I think maybe movies are going that way too now. Maybe people are starting to, even if DVDs seem to be like the highest selling thing out of all the formats, it's still in general it seems that maybe there's a curiosity back when it comes to physical media, and especially these boutiques where they're not just doing the simple, put it on a disc and not give you much of anything else, but there's these features, there's these fantastic artwork and packaging, and it's just luring everybody in. Is that something you guys are really aware of, that part of it seems to be pretty important for business moving forward?
Absolutely. I think, look, even before that, it's important for us. We at Umbrella are all sort of collectors. We
Yeah.
love, the different special features and what we can put together to make something a bit more premium. And, when it comes to the streaming side of things, you just don't get those little extras behind the scenes, whatever commentaries. And so being able to put together something physical, and especially for the content creators, for the creators behind it, the directors, the writers, the producers, they're also excited to see us putting together something a bit different, and something that's more than just, chucking it up on Google and iTunes. So yeah, I think that was really important to us. And just, at one point during sort of COVID, there was, because we've always had such a big library, the streaming side came to us and we were able to do big deals there. But from that as well came, this opportunity on the physical side where all these titles weren't up on platforms. So we were trying out new things and it was working. And, the stores online were working really well. And so it was like, great, let's pivot. Let's see what we can do. And we almost took a step back and realized, what do we also enjoy the most and how can we use that to our advantage? And obviously that came down primarily to the Australian catalog, and trying to harness that to the best that we could, exploring, what other distributors are doing and what's working with them on the physical side. And then from us trying to, use that to the best of our ability to make something new and creative, while using that Australian library, but also using all the international library that we've, had for years and years, like Suspiria and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Reanimator that we've had the rights for I think, 15, 20 years now. So it's been great.
Yeah. And you guys did some interesting things where you kind of, released some films that are kind of films that we've all, like you mentioned, like Texas Chainsaw, or like I think it was Dawn of the Dead. And you did like the alternative Australian covers. I thought that was kind of fun, that you guys kind of gave people because not only is it, sure. Yeah. There's, it's another edition of a film that's been released a lot, but it's also got its unique spin, where it kind of shows the love from the Australian side. And I thought that was a fun reason for people to maybe want to get that, collect it, So yeah, I love that you guys are thinking about things like that, especially like you're one of the few companies that actually involves yourself more in like the merch side too. With shirts and like extra bells and whistle packaging to make it an even more fuller, fun, thing for everybody. Because I think the only other company I can really think of that really does that a lot is Severin. Severin, does pins and sometimes like their most recent package has like a plush doll from the movie, or, extraterrestrial visitors, stuff like that. Like weird little trinkets. And I like that you guys are doing that as well. So, yeah.
For sure. It's that point of difference that we're trying to, find within ourselves, and that idea with utilizing the Australian posters, and sort of creating the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the Day of the Dead, and that was a fun little idea that was just to see if something like that would work, and it went down really well. And then
good
the collectible side and adding the t-shirts and the posters and the postcards and everything like that, again, it just seems to be working pretty well. Everybody's really loving it, and it's just a key point of difference that we're loving. And we are still close as well with Severin and Shout Factory, and we know them all very well. We can call them at any time, and we all sort of stay in touch in different ways. We're sort of their similar business in Australia, and they got UK and US. I mean, so there's a lot that we can always chat about and see what they're doing and see what we're doing, and see maybe there's ways to do things together or different. So they're both, I think, Severin and Shout Factory have been sort of long-standing relationships with Umbrella, and Jeff, the managing director of Umbrella. We've been pretty close with them for a very long time.
Yeah, that's great, man. And so Andrew, did you have a question? I thought.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, we do differentiate between, every time we mention Umbrella, there are like the special limited edition packages that come out like every once in a while, and we do make sure to mention them because they are limited, actually, which is also kind of cool because you're kind of like in an exclusive club of getting all of that extra swag, and they seem to sell out very quickly.
Seem to sell out at the pre-order.
Yeah, at the pre-order level, like they're going pretty instantly.
Absolutely. We tend to keep it just on the pre-order side. We don't. Those collector's editions are available after the pre-order, and we do set an amount, and try to keep it open. We try, sometimes we don't really specify, just to sort of keep it a little bit open, and if we can run a bit over when things are going really well, we do, but most of the time we keep it pretty tight. And it was great. One of the best reactions was the Terrifier collection and bundle, and that was, after the success of it theatrically, I was just emailing and calling every day trying to find out, where do I find All Hallows Eve, because I knew if I could get All Hallows Eve, that would be the massive point of difference to the other Terrifier 1 and 2 collections that were, I think, out in the UK at the time, and little things like that. So that was important to us.
Yeah, that's a big thing. When there's a lot of these labels and they're all putting out stuff all the time and fighting over rights for things, and so you got something that maybe other labels have already put out. It's about finding that way to differentiate yourself and make yourself stand out and still make it worth it to collectors. And it's good that you're trying different unique ways to do that, because sometimes it comes down to trying to get a new transfer. That's like a key point for a lot of people. But also, if you could just add some new features, it's like, if you can just give us some new features, that's an important investment for us. Especially even some collectors are willing to double dip, so it's like,
Exactly.
So that's good. That
I mean, yeah, we're no strangers to double dipping. What I also like is that you do give the option to, like, if people don't want to buy like all the bells and whistles, you could just buy the movie by itself if you want to add it that way. I mean, it gives them the option of not having to pay more than perhaps they're willing to pay. I've noticed that with a lot of your recent releases, that seems to be the case, which is a great option. I mean, there's also just a great diversity within Umbrella. I think that when we first started covering Umbrella, that was the biggest surprise, I would say, Steven, is that, like, you had all of these kind of sub labels within it, and they were all unique. It really gave us the opportunity as collectors to kind of learn what Ozploitation is and kind of like get into all of that. And then of course there's the other labels in there, but specifically the Ozploitation line. You talk about Australian cinema, and I think like the biggest asset for Umbrella is, putting Australian films in high quality out to an international audience who otherwise wouldn't know about it, because pretty sure a lot of people don't know about Australian cinema, and this was a good way to learn.
Yeah, and I think, look, that is sort of our bread and butter. That's where we started. That's where we're going. It's that Australian side is incredibly important to us, and I think a big difference, just when it comes to the rights holding for Umbrella. Just say if we're licensing a Reanimator or a Texas Chainsaw or whatever it is, usually an American or UK film, will only represent the Australian and New Zealand rights. Whereas for majority of the Australian films and releases that we have, we actually represent those rights for the world. So that's where we can dig in and work on the remasters, work with our partners, have a chat with Shout Factory or Severin or Arrow or Criterion, whoever it is, and see what else there is. And now we're very excited, with our partnership with Vinegar Syndrome for a lot of those Australian titles to potentially go on that side. And we're still trying to figure out, what that looks like for the future. But it's looking like at the moment a release a month with them, which is going really great. And they're super excited, and we're getting some great results out of them. But that's definitely something that we're trying to broaden as well. And look, the more we take on those classic Australian films and do something creative and different, not just on the physical side, but sometimes we might do a few cinema screenings or we might put it up on platforms. The producers are, stoked. There's their film that hasn't seen the light of day. Nobody, really remembers it. And here we're giving it the deluxe treatment. We're remastering it. We're adding special features, doing commentaries. They love it. It's, something for them to retire on. They're getting a little bit of something on the back end, whatever it is. And they're super happy. Their film gets, that HD treatment and gets to live on, where they thought, at one point it would have died and that nobody would have ever seen it again. So they're super excited about that. And because we keep doing it, more and more people keep coming to us, which is great. So there's, more opportunities coming through. And, the next step for us is, while we are Australia, we have our friends just across the pond at New Zealand. And we're trying to work up some opportunities there to see if we can grow the New Zealand catalog as well. Because we've done some fantastic films like The Quiet Earth and The Navigator. And those sort of films which are awesome. But and everyone's always been looking for the holy grail that is the Peter Jackson films.
Oh my goodness.
Don't
We've been
start
talking-
don't start talking about that.
I'll just say this. We've been talking, Steven and I personally, I think I've been talking about that for, what's it going on, 6 or 7 years now that
I
I've
don't
known
know,
you,
man.
Steven?
It's I've lost count of how many years it's been. We've been
Let's
saying,
just say-
where's the HDs of them?
Yeah,
the
Peter
updates
Jackson
of them
promised
movies?
us those movies a long time ago, and we're
Yeah.
still waiting. Hopefully
but,
someday
Well,
soon.
I stay in touch with his team regularly. That's all I'll say. But
Okay.
they're Peter's got them himself, or Sir Peter has got them himself. He's obviously he's done some incredible stuff on the restoration side. So he's given his own films the deluxe treatment
Yeah.
as well.
Oh yeah, I think that's yeah. I do not distrust him going full tilt on that. I know he, of course, he worked on the new restorations of Lord of the Rings for years and the Hobbit films, and then other projects he's been on. But yeah, I don't doubt that when those come out, people are going to be wholly satisfied with them.
Yeah.
But it's just like I want them. It's like
Dude,
the
take a break
impatience
from
always
everything.
sets in.
Needs to clear a schedule and just sit down with some one at a time, man. Just give us something.
I know exactly, but it is interesting how when you look at kind of the way way things work in Australia is different than kind of the way they work here. I would say, just because it's interesting that you brought up the ideas that you guys kind of own the Australian catalog, whereas opposed to here, it's more of like a licensing deal to kind of distribute or whatever the case may be. But it's just interesting. Were those rights kind of just up for grabs and no one wanted them, or were they just kind of in flux over time?
We don't. There is a chunk that we own outright, as in they are owned in perpetuity by Umbrella, but the majority are just we represent the world rights for them on behalf of the company that owns them or the producers, because they don't know really what to do with them or how to do with them, and nobody else is really going to know what some small little Australian comedy might be. So we just work with them, and as I said, nobody's doing anything with those films, so they're pretty easy to have a chat with the producer, give a clear outline of what we intend on doing, trying to get them on board, and then working with them very closely. One of the ones that we worked very closely with was Spirits of the Air, Gremlins of the Clouds, which was with Alex Proyas, his first film. And so, he worked very closely with us in terms of remastering it. He put a bunch of special features together himself.
Wow.
And he's been very happy with how it's gotten back out there. And we continue to, do that with him and many other film, producers and directors. And just, some of the biggest pain is just trying to find where the rights are, because they've just gone through so many different companies and so many different people. One of the ones which we tried, Razorback was one that the producers had always thought that they had the world rights to it, but Warner Brothers had all rights except for Australia around the world. And so they've sort of blocked it off, and that's why there hasn't been that much stuff going on with Razorback. But we have Razorback, and we've worked very closely with the producers on that one. So so sometimes they get tied up in certain ways, sometimes they're open, sometimes you just have to find and look at the back end of the credits of the film to see who's got the copyright there, or find somebody who's got it. So and then the other problem after that is, great, who's got the license, where are the materials, whose shed do we have to look into? Luckily, there is the National Film and Sound Archive here in Australia, where a lot of the materials are kept, but sometimes they don't have much, or sometimes somebody's put it there who wasn't the owner or producer, and they're the ones who can only take it out because they have the sign off, but they had actually nothing to do with the film. That it can be a pretty complicated process and take a lot of time.
That was actually going to be my next question, was like, what are the archives looking like in Australia? Because here it's kind of, I think, spread out, pretty much. There's different archives at different studios. There's materials that people find in sheds, like you said. I just saw a post by, I think it may have been Andrew Furtado from Severin, where he had like an open canister from like a shed he found, and the film elements in it were so corroded. I'm like, this stuff is like burnt charcoal. That's unusable stuff. Yeah. And it's just like, it's incredible how a lot of the stuff just not stored well over time. And when you're dealing with kind of that exploitation type of era, which is like films from the 70s, we're talking
Hmm.
films that are over 40 years old that have been sitting in canisters for how long. So I was wondering if you've ever kind of uh have you ever looked for a film and you just can't find the elements, or you find them and they're not in good shape, or stuff like that?
Yeah, there's certain films that were made for TV that will just never be able to get that HD treatment, which is always a pain. There's a film called Kadecha, which I think that it got an upres from, I think maybe Severin or Arrow. But films like that, there's never the original materials to work from. I'll have to have a look and see which of the ones that we've been chasing for a long time and just got to dead end after dead end. I mean, there is a ton, but at the end of the day, the most important ones and the big ones have been, the materials are there. They're at the Film and Sound Archive, where they sometimes work on their own restorations. So they handled the restoration for Picnic at Hanging Rock and Wake in Fright. And sometimes at the time, I think they did Wake in Fright to 2K. So we're looking at, exploring what else we can do with Wake in Fright. But they've also done, crazy ones like The Howling 3. And it's just like, great, happy to see that they're restoring that, but they have a very different process to us. And, they sort of pick and choose, and they might do films like Priscilla. Whereas we're very happy, exploring some unknown film that hasn't seen the light of day and seeing what we can do there. So there's a bit of a mixture. It's always, as I said, trying to find the rights first and then trying to find the materials. And sometimes we'll just try to find the materials, then the rights, because may as well not go down that rabbit hole on the rights before, if there's no materials available anywhere.
Yeah.
But we do keep a very close contact with the National Film and Sound Archive, because they do have a lot. And even if they don't have the original materials, they'll have something there that you can use, or they might have a poster or a trailer or a script or anything like that that can be helpful. So, or just contacts in the right position. But yeah, it's a lot of phone calls and a bit of a process that goes on. But yeah, we have a stack of, we sort of have a lineup of all the films that we're looking to remaster, and it tends to grow and change, and other ones become priorities. But we're pretty excited for what's to come.
That's great. That's great. And so, we'll obviously we're gonna get more and more into Umbrella, but we do want to get personally into your history with the company, and
Sure.
how it all started with you, and how you got to this position where you are as the general manager, which I guess you're basically overseeing everything in a way, right? Every kind of asset, of it. So how did we start? How did we start it with Umbrella?
Yeah, let's go back to the
So,
beginning.
I mean, even before Umbrella, I started where a lot of people tend to have started at the video store.
Oh,
I think
man.
mine was a Blockbuster, and I worked there for a few years. And look, I think I always had a very close connection to film through Jeff, my dad. He's the managing director of Umbrella, and he set it up about 22 years ago now. And before that, he was in the record business. So he used to sell records and operate a few stores in Melbourne and around Australia. So I think his idea was, that if he could sell a CD, he could, sell a DVD. And I think in 2001, bit of a turn, there was a company that, wanted to take his whole store online. And they did, but they were just a few years too early, and it shut down, I think, 2 years later. But so he was very happy. He sort of got out at a great time, went into the DVD side, and his first film that he licensed was Malcolm. And I think the connection was that his lawyer, who he represented on the music side, also represented the film side. So there was that connection. And so he started getting into the DVD business. And at the time, he was in the same office as Madman. If you know Madman, they're a big distributor here in Australia. And so they became all close, and there was another group called the AV channel there, and they sort of all worked together, trying and doing their own different thing. And Madman focused on the anime side, and Jeff focused on, the Australian side and growing that library. So as things grew, I was sort of always coming in and forth as a kid, going in there and seeing. And I remember looking at the anime side going, oh, who cares about this? What are they going to do with this? And then, obviously it's massive now.
It's
and
a massive business. Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. And yeah, Madman is pretty much set up into one anime side and one, of their new release side. It became its own huge thing. And I remember thinking, nobody cares about Spirited Away, but boy, was I wrong. I was at 10 or whatever it was, but yeah. And then I think, how did I go? I think after I finished school, he took me to Cannes one year before I was going to Europe with some friends, and he said, "Oh, I'll pay for your flight to France if you come join me and just check out, see if you like Cannes and the film festival." And of course, what's not to like? You're getting a part of the business and seeing what is out there. And I was getting to meet all these people, and I thought, okay, there's something pretty great here. Understanding at the time I was just running around watching movies and having a bit of fun, and I did think there was something there. And I had sort of worked odd jobs doing some design stuff with Umbrella and just doing DVD packing and working in the warehouse and little stuff like that. So I knew about the catalog, but and then after I came back, I studied film and television for I think a year and a half, 2 years. And I decided that wasn't for me. And I, suited up and, I guess went into Umbrella and sort of, where did I start? I started in the sort of customer service and DVD packing area. So I got used to the Umbrella coding system.
Dealing with complaints a lot. And
yeah. And a lot of people who at the time, some people would actually come into the office and try to pick up stuff, which we don't really do now.
Oh, yeah, that's weird.
That's a little weird. It's not a store.
Yeah. And it was always, some odd stuff. We used to have a few erotic films, and I think they didn't want to pick them up, or didn't want them shipped to the house. They'd come pick them up. And
yes.
They wanted to be discreet.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't want their wives to find out. Yeah.
Exactly. So then, obviously I was part of that side of the business, and I guess people above me who would teach me would end up going a different direction. And slowly I went to managing the website, and then I wanted to get into the production side of things. So actually learning about the DVD production side and the special features and that. But my dad actually said, "No, I don't want you doing that. I see that might be what you love," but he wanted me to sort of go towards the new release side and learn a bit more about the other side of the business. And so I then became an acquisitions assistant. So still got to go back to Cannes and to the different markets, to Toronto and to Berlin and LA for the American film market. And slowly I was there, I think, handling that for 2-3 years. And then the person above me ended up leaving and going to another role. So I took over the acquisition side, and then I was handling that for about 2 years. And then I thought there was a better way of integrating the sales with the acquisition side. And so I implemented that, and then slowly, took over all acquisitions and sales for that side of the team. And then sort of COVID struck, and I knew that there was time for a bit of a change. And so I sat down with Jeff and said, all right, I think there's a way that we can restructure things and, change the team up a little bit. And also that was a big sort of position where we said, all right, let's take a step back and see, what are we most passionate about? Where, is the biggest opportunity? What should we focus on? And slowly, from that position, made a few good decisions with some films and some deals. And I guess from there came general manager, and the team's grown a little bit more from there. And so I think there's about 13 of us now, 14 of us. So that's across, new releases in cinemas, new releases on demand. There's the library side. There's physical. There's the accountants. There's sales. We've got a design in-house. We've got a video editor in-house. So there's lots of different things. But things are going pretty good, I guess.
That's a relatively small team for all of that stuff you're doing now. I mean, wow. I would have, when you were about to say a number, I was like, he's going to say like 30, maybe 30, 40, no, 14. It's like, geez, that's not even a baseball team.
That's very true. It's not.
I think, the people who work on the certain, if we talk about the physical side, there is let's see, there's two people. Max, who runs our web shop, and Max is the one who puts together all the crazy ideas for, you know, a Weird Al t-shirt or a Terrifier doll and the Terrifier glasses. He does that. He runs the whole Shopify web store. He puts all those collector's editions together. But we also have a few people outside of our team, outside of the Umbrella team, who we sort of outsource to, you know, hey, let's make some special features. Go find this, go find that, help find the materials. But Aaron as well, our production manager, he facilitates that and goes to help find the materials. And then we've also got another guy, James, who sort of oversees that side of the business. And there's people doing different things. So, you know, our sales manager handles the physical side of sales to retail, and also handles online and on-demand sales through iTunes and Google and whatnot. And so there's always a bit of a mix, but we try to integrate, you know, what we're doing on the physical side and on demand with the theatrical side as well. So the theatrical team. So yeah, it's a small team, but we work hard. That's for sure.
Oh no,
because there's so much that Umbrella seems to do. Like, it's not just the physical side. You know, there's the theatrical element to it. There's the digital element, like you're saying. You know, and then everything kind of together. So it seems like it's just it seems a lot larger than in my head than it actually is. How is, you know, the theatrical being so different? Is that handled by a team that just handles theatrical stuff like acquisition and, you know, putting movies into theaters and all that kind of stuff? Because it seems like theatrical is so vastly different than the physical media stuff.
Yeah, so we I guess during COVID is when we made a decision where we were going to slow down a bit on the theatrical side. We knew there was some shakeups. We ended up doing, you know, 2 Netflix originals, 2 Stan original stands up, you know, at one of the streaming platforms here that's pretty local. We did, I think, one with Paramount, one with Amazon Prime. So we knew that there were some opportunities there, but at the end of the day, a lot of that was coming from the Australian content and less so from the international side. And we also knew that films like The Babadook, which are ones that we got involved with at a script very early on, were ones that, you know, we could work and get our hands in. And so that's something that I handle from the acquisition side, is, you know, working very closely with the Australian creatives. And we just knew there was more communication on the Australian side than there was from the international side. So sometimes, you know, from the American and UK distributors, they go, all right, you know, we don't even have a trailer or a poster, but we're going to release this in 2 weeks in cinemas. And it's like, great, you know, we need to work on a theatrical release plan 3 or 4 months out. You know, we can't just turn around something that quick. And we know that they're going to go straight on demand, you know, 2 days later after it's in cinemas. So it was like, okay, we have to slow down on the international side. And so that sort of spread things out a little bit, because we're working on Australian content where, you know, that you're getting in from the script stage. And so it might be 1 or 2 years till you might, you know, end up seeing anything. But Nikita, she runs our theatrical side, and I help her with the acquisitions and oversee the theatrical side. But there's a lot of different help that we can use. There's a lot of different marketing teams and agencies that help us and can support us with our theatrical releases. But we used to be doing around 12 to 15 theatrical releases a year, but have slowed down a little bit. But we do intend on getting back to that position. But I guess in general, if I'm talking about the amount of content that we have, we probably represent over 1,000 films and TV shows in Australia and New Zealand overall, and about 450, maybe a bit more, that we represent for the world. And that's films and TV shows. And some of these are shows that, you know, might have 500 episodes and we just have no idea what to do with, because we're going to have to, you know, master every episode from digibetas and things like that. And it's just, okay, how can we actually exploit that? And we do have opportunities coming into the future that I can touch on, but that's sort of one side. But we also tend or try to release around 2 to 4 physical releases a month. That's the aim, to try to get to about 4 a month. And now that we have a bit more of a steady stream of content from the international side and the Australian side, and a bit more of a focus and strategy, we think we'll be able to hit that. And then it's probably around, up to 5 new releases a month. And that comes from the acquisition side. That can be, it's usually pretty genre skewed. And sometimes there's, you know, some remasters in there. there might be some classics that have got some new treatment or some new titles that we're looking at. So little things like that. So there's a lot coming on the on-demand side as well. So yeah, it's a pretty steady stream of content.
Yeah,
a lot of
that's
work
a
for
lot.
14. That's a lot for 14 people.
That's a lot of moving parts.
But
Like it's just it's kind of
yeah,
incredible.
with the theatrical though, now not only new releases, but do you guys do a lot of repertory? Like you do some of your films that maybe you've gotten for Umbrella's physical side, like restored, and then maybe do some theatrical kind of shows for it. Do you guys do that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's been something that we've been having a lot of fun with lately, is working on those remasters. And so one of the ones that we just did was Super Mario Brothers. We've had the theatrical rights and all rights for the original film, and so we did an anniversary re-release of that one. And I've been told that there's a 4K coming. So I mean, I don't know, they haven't announced anything yet, but I did get told they're working on it and they're just trying to find the materials. So there probably will be a Super Mario Brothers 4K coming at one point. I'm not sure, but yeah, so that'll be fun.
Maybe they're trying to come out in time for that animated movies.
Well, the
4K
movies
release,
that movie's already out, Steven.
Well, it's out in theaters, but when that gets its
Oh,
physical release, maybe
gotcha.
it'll coincide with the physical release of that movie.
I do remember that Umbrella did put out the 1993 Super Mario Brothers film, and I know a lot of people ended up buying that. A lot of collectors that I saw online probably own that disc right now. People listening probably own that disc right now.
I'm sure. There was something that popped up on Reddit right before we were about to start pressing, and it was somebody who had found all this extra material and uncut footage and unseen footage, and we just chased them down and got all this footage that nobody else had, and it was great. And then I think they're trying to do some remastering stuff with that, from what I last heard. But yeah, that was a fun release. But that was before we started doing more of the boutique collector's editions. So now we're trying to make that a bit more standard, where we can have something very, boutique and collector style that are limited to the pre-orders, and then have the standard slipcover edition come after. We're trying to continue down that path more and more.
Yeah, I like that. So back to a little bit more of your personal taste. So growing up in that video store and all that, so what's some of the stuff that you were into film wise? That kind of influenced your love of film.
I mean, surprisingly, it wasn't horror. That sort of came a bit after. But my favorite movie of all time is probably Back to the Future 1 and 2. And then, closely followed by Blade Runner. I think they sort of, so I guess there's a sci-fi skew there. But then recently I forgot that I don't know how many times, I must have watched Jason and the Argonauts, that film, for some reason, so many times. Something about those Ray Harryhausen effects, I always got there. But I think probably sci-fi was always a big love, and the Star Wars prequels, were something I was very fond of as a kid. But even just in the video store, just trying out whatever had the best cover and seeing what was there and something new to explore. But what I sort of fell deeper in love with was the Australian side of cinema. I think because everybody I would speak to, even here in Australia, would just have no idea what these movies were, and it was something quite new to me. Just because everyone I was around was talking about the American and UK films, and just didn't know the history that and where we had started. And some of these great films. And I remember seeing The Man from Hong Kong for the first time, thinking, holy shit, why are they martial arts fighting on Uluru, which is now such a sacred spot, and that you couldn't even get close to now in terms of walking on top of it. Here they are fighting on top of it for a movie. It's like incredible that they even got that opportunity. And then you go into Mad Max and Turkey Shoot and Razorback and all these crazy films, and some of the stories that came out of them. And I think as well, I got to meet people like Brian Trenchard Smith and have a chat with him, and he was just such a delight and just such a personable person. And he'd come over to Australia and I'd catch up with him, or I'd see him in LA. And so that was always a great experience. And then films and documentaries like Not Quite Hollywood, which sort of opened that all up for a lot of other people and sort of showed that there is something more here. So that was always great fun to see what was there on the Australian side of things, and films like Picnic at Hanging Rock and The Last Wave, which are just, incredible films. And I didn't even realize we could make films that great. And then, my world was sort of broken when I saw Wake in Fright, and just, oh my God, what a film. So yeah, it was great to have that.
Australian cinema is one that I think it's like always there. I think people, it's kind of it's similar to like Canadian cinema in the sense of like we know Canadian actors, we know a lot of Australian directors, but I think we don't realize that some of them come over to America and make films, and then some of these movies are actually Australian films. We don't realize they're Australian films. But you talked about a few, like Richard Franklin, of course, is a big one. I'm blanking on his name, but a more recent director, he did The Rover.
Oh yeah, is it David Michaud? Was that David
That's
Michaud?
it, David Michaud.
That is David Michaud.
He's another one I really like. And there's just, of course, George Miller is another big one who continues to make more Mad Max movies, and that, I think they're filming the newest one right now. So it is kind of interesting that you say that there's kind of a disconnect even in Australia to your own cinema,
which is interesting, because I feel like, just from a US perspective, I would say, Stephen, growing up, learning about movies, we only tend to learn about English language films first and foremost, and it's always Hollywood or stuff that's made in the UK, which is what Ari was just saying.
It really is the language barrier. I think anything that's the language that your first language, you draw towards that, and then it's really from there. It's just about your curiosity.
Yeah, it's almost as if Hollywood's like dominated like world cinema for like a century. But in a way, like, there's so much more outside of Hollywood that is seemingly undiscovered, but it's always there. So it's not, you just kind of have to seek it out. And I think Australia is even like kind of below that. Like, I think when you first get out of the, Hollywood bubble.
The boom was in the 70s, right?
Yeah,
the 70s is when
but when you get out of the Hollywood bubble, the first thing you go to is Europe. Like, that seems to be Europe, and then, Japan, China, East Asia. And I feel like you don't get to Australia until like after that.
Yeah.
It's like but it's there. But like you were saying, Stephen, it really is. 70s was kind of like when things really started, when you've got like Walkabout, the Nicholas Roeg stuff, and all kind of other works from great Australian directors. But it seems like you don't discover Australian directors until they start making films here in Hollywood, and then that's when people start learning who they are. And like that seems to be the case with so many of them.
It's a weird thing. It shows you how big Hollywood is. Like how much it's kind of encapsulates the world cinema, which is not. I don't think it's that great of a thing right now. I kind of wish it was. I wish the rest of cinema in the world had a little bit more opportunities to shine, instead of American cinema only getting, especially with what seems to get the forefront in American cinema.
And a lot of that is to do with the way our social media is structured and the way the news cycle is structured. Is it's always skewed in a certain way. We're only seeing what they want us to see. They're selling their ideas, they're selling their products, literally
what they put the most money into. I get it.
That's true.
I would say I had some similar tastes. I definitely loved Back to the Future growing up. I don't know what it was. I'm wrong about this feeling, but I always really loved the third one. Actually, I always really loved the one where they went to the West. I know you said 1 and 2. You said 1 and 2, so
because I sort of put them at the top of my list, 1 and 2 as sort of one movie, and I love the third. I love the whole charm that is behind one.
Him calling himself Eastwood, and all that stuff.
Yeah,
and I know Blade Runner is a big one for Andrew. And
Blade Runner is one of my all-time favorites. Like top 5, top 10. It's a film. It's a film I think about like very often. Very often. I also loved Blade Runner 2049. I completely just enthralled with that film.
And I think with Australian films, for me, I think my introduction, would probably the one that comes to mind is, and of course, because I'm younger, I didn't start getting, I'm 34, so I'm thinking of more recent Australian films. So Animal Kingdom was the first one that really came to mind, with Joel Edgerton and Guy Pearce, and that film I thought was fantastic, and was before I even was really thinking about cinema from all around the world. It was a movie I saw and I was like, oh, that was really cool. And then I started looking into the director, and then I started, seeing, and then I realized eventually, like, oh, he's not an American director. He's from another country, and it just opened my eyes, so what would you say Wake in Fright is your probably your top Australian film?
Yeah, look, I'd say it probably is one of my favorite Australian films of all time. Another favorite would be The Proposition.
Oh yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
I bring
that just
that
got
up.
a BFI release, pretty good BFI.
Yeah, I bring that film up a lot because it's an Australian Western, which is not a concept that I think that a lot of people understand or are familiar
it makes
with.
sense. It makes sense for the landscape.
Yeah, for the geography, literally.
Yeah. But
absolutely.
Yeah, Guy Pearce in that film is fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's and then a great director, and he's done some interesting stuff for sure. And I mean, obviously, Picnic at Hanging Rock, and and Last Wave from Peter Weir, and just Peter Weir's filmography in general is just incredible. And one of those Australian creatives who is just able to do some of the most incredible films, similar, I guess, to George Miller. And there hasn't really been, ones like that, I don't think, in a while. I mean, there is the David Michauds and Justin Kurzel with, Nitram and similar films, but it's been a while since we've had one of those big time Australian directors really breaking through on the art house side and critically, and for audiences as well. So
I believe is Jennifer Kent's Australian director. She's starting to get in there. I think she's had a cut. Like you brought up the Babadook, and I think she did Nightingale was pretty good. And so yeah, she's starting to get some attention there, and I'm always fascinated by what she's got going on next. But one of my favorite lines that you guys do is that Beyond line on films, and I love one of my favorite releases, and I just love. I remember watching this movie for the first time during. I didn't get COVID yet. I got COVID once, and actually didn't get that sick, but I got the shot for COVID and I got really sick. And during that time, I pulled out my Blu-ray from you guys of Psycho Gorman.
Oh yeah.
God, I fucking love that movie. Second, I was in pain. I was laying there on the couch in pain. I put in Psycho Gorman. I'm gonna watch this movie. I've been wanting to watch this, and that movie made me laugh so hard, even being in pain. And just
awesome.
A great release. I love the art, the cover, the slip and everything. Just a fantastic. I think it's I know there's been a few releases of that movie, but I think that's kind of the one to go to. I think is the Umbrella Psycho Gorman release, and it's just I hope they make a sequel to that movie.
Well, I mean, I've got rumors that it's coming.
Really? Wow, I hadn't seen. I don't keep up too much.
I don't know, but I've heard.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. The movie lends itself to having a sequel.
I hope so.
In some way, because it's so weird that it's like it doesn't. You don't have to make. It doesn't have to make logical sense to make a sequel.
It doesn't.
Something like that.
He's. Yeah, bring him back. The kids are a little bit older. Like you're getting into other stuff and
do more.
He's killing more people. Yeah. Or maybe one of the other alien civilizations comes to Earth and tries to attack Earth, and he has to fend them off. Who knows, man? I mean, it's
exactly. They can have so much fun with that film. But I think that director, Steve Kostanski, he's. I've read some two other scripts that he's got in the works, and they're just a ton of fun, and they're going to be awesome.
You're going to be more practical effects, weird stuff. Okay, good, because that's what I love so much about that movie is it's got this charm of a kind of a throwbackness where it's ambitious, but it doesn't try to go beyond what it's trying to do, and with that budget he's on, he uses it perfectly and knows that it doesn't have to look real. It just needs to be interesting. And as long as it's interesting, people are going to be into it. and
Into the
just
weirdness of it all. Like
into
you
the
got to be really into
weirdness,
the weirdness.
into the crudeness of Psycho Gorman. I just love that character. But
Yeah, I did want to ask about, a line that I've kind of gravitated towards, which was the sunburnt screens line.
Mhm.
Just because it's just such a unique line because it's, you got your exploitation stuff, and then this is kind of like, would you say this is like more like indie Australian film line?
I think to an extent, and more films that sort of have a mix of drama mixed in with comedy or thriller or romance. Yeah, sort of the staple classic Australian film to an extent. Yeah, a little less genre heavy, sort of limited, well, not limited budget, but yeah, films that were for the general public of Australia to an extent.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
I was just
and
wondering
they,
where the origin of that name came from because it's such a
uh,
interesting
yeah,
name. Did you guys
yeah,
come
we
up with
love
you guys come up with that by yourself
We
from
came up with
yourselves?
that name, and we're going to use it again for somewhere else that I can't talk about.
Okay.
But yeah, we do really love that name. But I think the Sunburnt Cinema line and the Sunburnt Screens, and beyond genres and those lines, we are continuing to release those films on physical, but we've sort of removed that name. We think there was a bit of a barrier to entry for a lot of audience to understand. Oh, if I got this one, I'd have to get the other 15 beyond genres. And as
Right.
much as we loved it, it became a bit tough to, and it was a bit of a shame to lose that. But we're still sticking with those films. But I think for the time being, the names of those collections have ceased.
I was actually just going to ask that, but I didn't know how to approach. So I'm glad you brought it up, because I did notice that you kind of have we've been talking so much about these different lines or labels or whatever or sub labels, and you guys have kind of moved away from that. I didn't know if that was like there was a specific reason why, which I think you kind of
Yeah.
just answered. I didn't know if you were just scaling back when it came to structuring things like that, but
Well, I think there was definitely, one of the big ones, and the issues we had with Sunburnt Screens and that line was it was tough to get the sales really, and we knew we wanted to figure out a way to maximize the potential for those films, and not just have to rely on certain figures and just exploring different ways. And we knew that if they were perhaps in that line and there was number 22 or whatever it is, and people just didn't know enough about it, whereas if it was marketed alongside some of these other films and these collector's editions, there might be more of a chance for them to dive in and try something new that wasn't part of these collections, where they're looking at all the other films going, what the hell are these? I'm not going to figure this out, so I'm just going to stay back. Whereas if it was had a fantastic cover with a full art print and a full design and some collector's edition booklet with it, then maybe that might be something else that could get them in. So it's a lot of juggling in terms of trying out things, and we still are trying out a lot of different new things, and we're still trying to grow the market quite a bit within Umbrella, and then slowly drip feed some of these smaller titles. One of the latest ones was this film called Houseboat Horror, which is a pretty uniquely Australian film, very schlocky, almost slasher horror, but nobody really knows about it, and it's good to see it's getting a good reception. But that was one where it's like, this could go one or two ways. We're not really sure exactly how big it's going to be, but it's about trying to make it so it's something that people can just give it a crack at and see if they like it or not. So a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm all about blind buying.
I was also
yeah.
I'll do. Yeah, Steven's about blind buying. I'm more what's the word I'm looking for? Cautious.
He's definitely more cautious than
I guess
that. But a similar thing happened not too long ago with Arrow. Arrow did that thing where they had the Arrow Academy kind of like subline, where I guess they would put more of their artsier films on the Arrow Academy line, and
or
then
plastic
eventually
films and stuff.
Yeah, and then they decided to just go streamline it with all Arrow Video kind of label. And so I guess that's similar to what you guys are kind of trying to do, is you're figuring put it all under the quote unquote umbrella of Umbrella Entertainment.
Nice.
And that will help make sure that everything gets the same kind of exposure. Hopefully maybe entices people to check out something that they might not have checked out when we're trying to compartmentalize certain movies. So instead, just kind of be like, this is all how we feel about all these movies. They're all important, in one direction.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's good. I like that. And one thing I noticed is you guys have been heavy on the Kim Jong-un films.
I was just gonna bring this up.
Yeah,
because you guys are putting out A Tale of Two Sisters along with Houseboat, which you guys just announced this week.
Yeah, and in the last couple months, I Saw the Devil is getting a great release, and then of course also
Bittersweet Life.
Yeah, Bittersweet Life, which I know Andrew gave a glowing review of that film when we talked about it when it got announced.
I did when you guys announced it, and we covered it here on the show. I mean, could talk about two completely different titles that you guys announced: Houseboat and A Tale of Two Sisters.
Yeah.
I mean, it's couldn't get more wide of a range there.
Well, I think we sort of pin it down to, we have tried not to pigeonhole ourselves into certain films and just going down, 80s horror or, Australian classics or whatever it is. And the opportunity came up. I actually just met with this Korean producer who had all these rights, and I acquired the film Project Wolf Hunting, one of the TIFF Midnight Madness films, and I was there at Toronto, and I was dealing with this Korean licensor, this producer, and I was just saying, what other films do you have? We had some great success with Old Boy. What else can we do? And she's like, I have, these 3 films. And I was like, fantastic. Let's do a deal. Let's see what we can have fun with. And that's sort of how that came about. And I'd always been a huge fan of I Saw the Devil, and I hadn't seen Bittersweet Life and Tale of Two Sisters at the time. But yeah, fantastic films. And then I also knew that Kim Ji-won's got a new film coming out. I think they're aiming to hope, that it'll be at Cannes. I think it's called Cobweb. And it's a bit of a dark comedy about filmmaking, I think. So it'll be great to see, where that lands, and we'll look at that to see if it's something we might acquire as well for the theatrical side and beyond. So that was sort of that thinking behind those 3 films. But there's a lot of Korean films that, they're just sitting there. No distributor has looked at them. And, for us, we can look at all rights distribution, and we did some theatrical screenings, and we have some more theatrical screenings coming up of those films. And, I ended up putting a few of them on platforms and selling them to different streaming platforms and stuff. So it worked out really great. We're pretty stoked about those films, and, hopefully we can give them a long life. And, there's a bunch of other ones that we're looking at, but I've also been trying to see who I can speak to on the Japanese side. There's some great films there that we'd love to dive into, just because, again, I can see that, when things are, tend to get a bit tough around distribution, certain distributors will slow down, and there used to be, a lot of opportunities on the physical side for everyone, and that's slowed down. So there really isn't as much competition as there was, years ago, or even a year ago now. And so a lot of these films just sort of disappear, or the rights have lapsed from when they initially released. Most of the time, a license will be 7, 10 or 12 years. And so you can sort of figure out, all right, great, if somebody released that 10 years ago, it's probably lapsed, and I can have a look into that. But most of the time as well, they're pretty open to, doing some sort of deal if there's some interest. I mean, I think about it like, well, who else is going to be, negotiating against me? Probably not many people, if not no one. So I think, if I can present, hey, look what we've done with Old Boy, Bittersweet Life, Tale of Two Sisters, I Saw the Devil, here's something that we could replicate for your releases, I think it becomes pretty attractive for them. So
and one thing I'll point out about Tale of Two Sisters, because I do have the Arrow release of that I think came out a couple years ago, but this does have a new 4K restoration supervised by the director. So that's if there's an enticement, guys, there you go. And this movie already looks beautiful. Looks beautiful, but it's yeah.
I was just going to say that you guys have done or extensive work has been done to that film to put it in the best way you can.
No, absolutely. And on the 4K side of things, we are dabbling, let's say. We know that the films that have been and got the 4K remasters, and we want to try it out. It's something, it's definitely in our future, and we do have a few lined up. We are thinking we might start where we've always sort of started, on the Australian Ozploitation side, and coming back to them and looking at a few of the 4K stuff of the films that we remastered ourselves. So that's probably where we'll start. But we know that there are films like A Tale of Two Sisters, which are 4K and available. And there's a few of them in the lineup as well.
Yeah, we've talked to a few different companies, and we've talked to them about 4K, like an Indicator, and they're starting to put out their first 4Ks, and it's definitely seems like you have to be careful. You can't just start putting out this more expensive item, just thinking because it's put out every movie in the super highest quality thing. Some movies, certain comedies, they don't need to have that treatment. Right. I don't think necessarily.
And also, like, the technology behind all of that must be still relatively new. I say that even though it's been around for a little bit now, the format at least. Yeah. But I mean, like, the whole, the technology behind the restorations and the formatting and all this kind of extra stuff that goes into it. HDR is a kind of a newish thing. So it's always like, developing new masters specifically for that. And it seems like, everyone's kind of jumping into it, or not jumping in, but like delving into it a little bit here and there.
Some people jumped in quick, and some people were ahead of the game. Some people were waiting back to see how things sold, I think, which I think maybe you guys were kind of like waiting back and seeing where the mistakes might be, and and seeing what the proper way to step into it. Yeah.
With anything, there's always, little kinks and little like bugs to work out, and just to see where the market is. I mean, because we Steve and I talk about this all the time. The market for physical media seems to constantly be changing now. It's ever flowing, as you probably know. And I think that I mean, Steve and I talk about this all the time. I think 4K is the last format.
Hopefully it's the last format. Media. I can't do it again. I can't do it again, guys.
I just think, I don't know. I just don't know how much better the quality can get past this level of quality.
The only thing that needs a higher resolution thing
is
than
maybe
4K.
Newer films.
Maybe some newer films, but I'm thinking like, you see it a lot with older films, like silent films, or even some of them experimental films. We recently were like done in 8K, or that's just because it's such an old movie that they're trying to get the best resolution print as possible, so they go up-res it really high. For them really old films that are, but other than that, there's no need to we don't need to have 8K players. We don't need to 8K TVs. Like, Jesus.
That market, for that home media market, is dwindling a little bit. Specifically, the tech-wise, I think televisions they keep coming on the new ones every year, but there's very minimal changes they're making in terms of the quality of a television now, and whatever home setup you have, and consumers
they're just making them bigger and skinnier.
I mean, consumer mindsets are different. I mean, it's a lot of people don't have that mental capacity if they need to have a large television in their home anymore. They don't need to have a full entertainment setup. A computer or a tablet is fine for them. It's kind of it's a very vastly different world, and it's constantly changing the way we consume movies. And I think when it comes to the physical movies and the restorations of it all, I think we're reaching the plateau. I really do. And it's all about kind of sustaining. You know what I mean? Sustaining the quality and maybe building it up a little bit.
No, for sure. And I think, look, when it comes to the general physical buying audience, there's sort of a cap that it can reach to an extent. And I guess what we're excited about is we know that, so many of the physical audience know about Shout Factory and Arrow and Severin and all those guys, but they're still yet to learn about Umbrella. So we see that as a massive opportunity of growing us and growing the brand, and working on these physical releases and trying out different films and a different style of releases. So there's a lot more that we can do there. But I think, on one side, when somebody may have finished up and they've given up and they got their collection, there are also new people who are saying, how the hell do I find A Tale of Two Sisters in Australia and New Zealand or whatever it is? It's like you have to get a physical. That's the only way it's going to work. And so we are, try focus on releasing these films on physical first, and then putting some holdbacks between when they can be made available online. So there is that separation. And certain films like Wake in Fright, which we represent for the world, at this stage, I don't believe it's with any other distributors around the world. We've held on to it. All those rights have lapsed, and now we're looking at working on something extra and special for that one. So, seeing who we can speak to and how we can get the best opportunity out there on that one.
Fantastic, man. And so, wrapping it up, what would you say is, when it comes to your own collecting habits, what would be, I know we kind of talked about it. I don't know if we said something on camera or not, but what does the collection look like? I know you were saying you moved recently, so it's not really available for people to see, but what does that collection look like? Are you collecting a lot of other labels, or are you just mainstream?
Because we're friends with a lot of these other distributors, we can say, hey, we'll do a trade of the Umbrella stuff for your stuff, and that's always good fun. But I think the collection sits at about 1,300, 1,400 Blu-rays.
That's good
at the moment, so pretty hefty. I mean, there's still work to be done. I haven't really gone into the 4K side. I don't have that set up yet, and I'm a bit scared to start there because it may not ever end, and it's just, But I tend to just go. I'm in a very weird position at Umbrella where I'm like, okay, I don't have a certain release on Blu-ray, and then I just look it up and I can say, okay, nobody else has these rights in Australia. Let me acquire them, buy the Australian, New Zealand rights, and then
I'm just gonna make one for myself. No,
exactly. And that's happened quite a few times in terms of looking up and you go, oh, okay, why is this Blu-ray going for $100? Let me see if I can do something about that, and get a release out ourselves. And that happened, with Bittersweet Life and Tale of Two Sisters. I didn't have them, and I had I Saw the Devil and Old Boy, but I knew there's certain opportunities with those films. But a lot of the time it comes down to just seeing what's out there and making those decisions. But yeah, it's I can sort of make that selfish decision for me to have my own collector's edition or whatever it is, just by looking to acquire the rights and sensing the opportunity that's out there. But yeah.
Well, that's great, man. I think that's fun. I think it's fun. Anytime we have anybody on that is behind the scenes, that's just another collector like us and thinks that way. And I mean, if we were in your position, we'd probably do the same thing. But you know what? I'm just gonna make my own. Let me go in here and let me see if I can get the rights. And I'm gonna go for this. I want to do a feature here. I want to do audio commentary there. And we would do the same thing. So
how many times have I thought that? I mean, or it's specifically a movie that maybe has only been available on DVD for 20 years, and it's when is this Blu-ray going to come out?
I mean, what are the top ones for you guys that you're wanting to hear, and maybe I can do something about that?
Oh well, I mean, I don't
apart
know.
from the Peter Jackson ones, which we've spoken about.
We just talked about the Peter
that
Jackson
is what
ones.
it is. I mean, I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't think about it too much. I can just tell you from a personal, like a movie that I really love that I don't think's had a Blu-ray yet is a small little indie picture. I brought it up to Andy. I bring it up too much, I think, but it's a small little indie movie called Charlie Bartlett. It's like a coming of age movie. And it's Anton Yelchin, Robert Downey Jr. Came out in like the mid 2000s. And I believe it's only had a DVD, and it's one of the movies I think that just maybe has gotten forgotten. And I just really liked it. And I've always wanted to see a Blu-ray of that. At some point. So that's a personal for me. If you want to just make me just a Blu-ray for me,
I know.
I'm just kidding. but
if a film like this hasn't had a Blu-ray release before, that's already a pretty enticing position to be in.
It's a good coming of age film. And it's Robert Downey Jr. right at that time when he came back and he was Iron Man, and it was like right around the same time. So I think it gets forgotten that he did that movie. Yeah, and he did that movie, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and
it was part of his comeback tour.
Yeah, it was part of the comeback tour, and that one gets forgotten. And I just always thought it was really charming. And because we of course lost Anton Yelchin, and it just feels like a movie that I would like to see get get something, But there's probably other ones. You got me on the spot here, man. Why would you do that to me?
I
I'm
know.
supposed to do that to you.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I've got one. I'm just looking at my shelves just for
Oh
inspiration.
man,
A movie that I've always wanted to see a Blu-ray release, hasn't gotten one yet. I think the DVD is one of those where it's been out for 20 years. The Station Agent, which is a movie by Tom McCarthy, who people probably know him now because of the movie Spotlight. Yeah, he directed Spotlight, Win-Win, The Visitor. He's done some acting, but The Station Agent is just a movie he did back in 2003. Peter Dinklage is in it, Patricia Clarkson, Bobby Cannavale. This is way before anyone knew who Bobby Cannavale was, and he's going on to work with like Martin Scorsese and stuff like that. Really solid like indie film. I think it won a BAFTA award back then. Just really great indie film. Just fantastic indie film. I ended up finding the DVD.
It seems like Miramax are involved. So
that's sad. Well, that ends that discussion.
Yeah, I would say that's lost in the ether somewhere.
That's lost for until that company's not involved in anything anymore. But
well, not only that, just like I think those rights are murky. I mean, we talk about there's some studios who the rights, their catalog rights are just either some are here, some are there, or some are just are just hard to, or just impossible to get. We talked about Kevin Smith's Dogma, which is another Miramax film.
That's one that just,
and that's another one where that Blu-ray and the DVD have gone out of print pretty much everywhere, and then people are selling them now for like $150 US and whatnot, and it's like, oh, you could find this in a bargain bin 10 years ago. You could find it for dirt cheap, but it's interesting when the rights lapse happens and these things become, all of a sudden the value of them skyrocket. I think we've seen that so many times. And it's just that's a kind of a fascinating part of the collecting game,
I definitely want to give you more suggestions. So what I'll do is I'm going to email you some other suggestions.
Of course,
and of course, our audience, when you eventually hear this, please leave some suggestions in the comments. I'm sure Ari would love to hear of anything that anybody is wanting to see that hasn't gotten a Blu-ray release yet. So I'm sure he'll love to see that. So, but yeah, man. It's been lovely to talk to you, man. I appreciate you taking the time. And
no problem at all. Thanks for having me. I really
of course, anytime you want to come back and talk about anything. And if you just want to come on and talk Blu-ray announcements with us, if that's ever an interest, we do that as part of our full show. You can come on and talk some announcements with us if that's what you want to do. So if there's a place that if anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best place?
We have our customer service email, customerservice@umbrellaent.com.au. If you can, if there's anything that people want to say about our releases, that's always greatly encouraged. But we actually have let me just get the website up. We call it our FIDER page. It's umbrellaent.fider, FIDER.io. And we sort of keep that page open and have a look at it pretty constantly in terms of what people are requesting. So you can type in a film and see if somebody else has requested it. And it sort of works in this upvote system. So we can see what's trending and what people are requesting. And that way it's a great way for people to request films to us. And we do, as I said, we check that pretty regularly. We may not always go back and tell people we're working on that, because there have been certain times where we've said something and then somebody else got wind that we were looking to acquire that, and they've stopped us from acquiring it. And there was one time, even this guy, I mentioned it to him in an email saying, yes, I'm working on this film. And then he, it took a while, and he told everyone that I was working on this film. And then it never happened because the original distributor relicensed it. And I told this guy, I told you in confidence, and I said it very confidentially in my email, do not tell anybody. He went on, told everybody and made it very open. Very disappointing.
Very disappointing.
I'll never do that again.
I guess also to add, where can people, buy Umbrella releases?
The best.
The best spot is our shop. It's shop.umbrellaent.com.au. And, we put everything out there. Sign up to our newsletter. I think you get a bit of a discount as well if you haven't purchased from us before by signing up. And we're trying to make things as accessible as we can. We are, an Australian label and do focus on the Australian stuff, but also do the new releases and trying to do more of the collector's edition and, trying to widen what we can and not trying to pigeonhole ourselves into certain releases, but trying to have a lot of fun with it. And we try to take as much feedback as we can from everyone. So anything that people can suggest or anything that people can request that we change or, that's always really important. I remember one of the clear ones was, ensuring that we have subtitles on every release. That was a big one that we, felt we could implement. And that was pretty important to the audience and little things like that. And just, as we change and evolve, I guess everyone always requests, why aren't you guys releasing this on 4K? Yes, we hear you and we are trying and we will get into it. So stay tuned. We are, looking to announce some 4K releases soon, and we're pretty happy with how things went with Weird Al. So trying to see what else we can do there. But yeah, as I said, send through requests through our Fighter page. That's always a great place to start.
Yeah, you gotta get some people. Some collectors are a little bit crazier than other ones. They tend to get impatient. But I think I think you guys are passionate. Yeah. But everybody's got to be patient and you got to be realistic. So not everything's going to get a 4K release. But thanks again, Ari, and we'll catch you around next time.
No problem at all. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Andrew. Cheers, guys.